Hi there, this is Jacob Nash, and this is a review of Module 66 on anxiety disorders. So, what is an anxiety disorder? It's just when anxiety is to the point of being distressing or persistent. So, everyone can have anxiety to some extent, but if it's to the point where it's distressing or persistent, so it's just continuing, then we might consider that an anxiety disorder. Here are some examples of ones that there are. So GAD, that stands for generalized anxiety disorder. This is just if someone's continually tense and uneasy. Now, on a more personal level, there are two of these that I have been diagnosed with myself. So I can better explain what they mean. I'm trying to, like get better from and work through these, because it's not anxiety is not living with continual anxiety or pretty much an anxiety disorder is not always a good thing, or really never is. So, anyways, what this might mean is that I could overthink things. So I would try to plan something that I might be stressed out about, but to the point that is unneeded. Or a certain event that may have occurred, I may think that is way more important than it is. And so and I might go down the slippery slope. That's another characteristic of this. It could be that I say, well, if I don't do this, then this will happen, and then that will happen, like that. So that's kind of what that's like. Then panic disorder, that's not something that I've had, but that's just intense dread. So um someone could just all of a sudden just get into a panic and um I mean, we may have all had panics before every once in a while, but panic disorder, it means they're continual. And then a phobia, you probably know what that is. Afraid of some specific things. So some people might be afraid of bugs or um, heights or something, and a lot of these are pretty normal. Um, but there are some that can be extreme. So is some of these phobias can be extreme. So I forget what the word or what it's called, but there are some people that have a, a fear of storms. So what could that mean? That would mean if it was actually an anxiety disorder, this phobia, then it would mean that they would be so afraid that they might feel sick if they know a storm is coming, even days before. As soon as they hear that it's reported, and they will hide under a pillow when they think it's coming. And they can't, they pretty much the summers or spring could be hard for them if there's lots of thunderstorms in those times. All right, so OCD, this is just repetitive thoughts, troubled by repetitive thoughts or actions. I heard of someone with OCD that they got home and laid on their bed for hours thinking about every single thing that had occurred that day. Like, did I was I supposed to go at that stop sign on Fifth Street or something like that? Like every single thing, or that's just one thing, but um, a lot. What's important about these is not to just say that you have something kind of like as a joke or just saying it freely, because these are real things that people have. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's my OCD." Well, you might have not been if you weren't diagnosed with that professionally, then don't say that because it's not something that you just say. Okay. Um, I can't explain OCD that much better than that because that's not something that I personally deal with. PTSD is, you may have heard of this, lingering memories. This is another one that sometimes people will say they're like, um, that's my PTSD of this. Well, it's important to know that it can be very major. You may know, I know that my grandma had a neighbor that would just go out of his house in the middle of the night and sometimes shoot a gun and scream because it was his war PTSD. So it's important to know that these things are not just something to say to get attention. Like, and I know there's not that many people that do that, but I just know that I've heard of that before. Okay, so the next one is social anxiety disorder. And remember, I said two things. This is the other one. Intense fear of social situations, leading to avoiding of such. Well, that's a common one that I know. Uh, I can explain what it's like a little bit. I mean, I know that you don't have to know like that much detail about these, but it can help you remember it more if you hear about it. Um, so one instance when I was in high school, or not one instance, multiple instances, I never once ate in the school cafeteria. Never once. I would just eat in whatever class I had next when it was the lunch period. Um, but if that class for any reason happened to not be open during lunch, then that was a problem for me. So I would walk continually around the school for an hour until lunch was done and not eat lunch. Because you weren't allowed to just stand somewhere. You had to go into a class or you had to go in the cafeteria. But if the class that I was used to wasn't open, then I couldn't go in there. And I didn't want to just go into some random class, and I definitely didn't want to go into the cafeteria. Um, and that's just the most prominent example I could think of, but there's definitely many other instances, but it's just intense fear, fear that you might have to talk to someone that you don't know and you don't know what you would say. So you just completely avoid any situation that could possibly lead to that. Agoraphobia. So this might sort of sound like what I just said. Intense fear or avoidance of situations such as crowds where there are no control. I really haven't I've never really no one's really said anything about this, but um I mean this seems kind of similar honestly to what I said because I didn't ever want to go into like the cafeteria, which is where crowds were. So maybe that's also they're definitely related. But that for that agoraphobia is not necessarily that because of a social aspect. It's more just that you don't like crowds and you don't feel like there's any control. That's not necessarily what it is for me. Um, but anyways, post-traumatic growth. So what is this? So this is there could be potentially positive changes resulting from an extremely challenging circumstance and life change. So you whatever hardship you may have gone through might actually have some positive psychological changes. You might be what doesn't break you might make you stronger in the end. So the fortunate thing about these that were on this last slide is that they all are able to be defeated, but it can be difficult. So, anyways, that's the main thing. All right, let's look at some questions. What are some examples of anxiety disorders? Some examples include GAD, panic disorder, and phobias. Name the disorder characterized by inability to concentrate, depression, edginess, and the re-experience of stressful events. That's the key word, re-experience PTSD. Persistent anxiety-provoking thoughts is associated with OCD. Persistent thoughts, that's the key thing there. Training in the construction of anxiety hierarchy and relaxation technique. Oh, I didn't really talk about this, but this can be a useful thing to know. In some cases, training construction of anxiety hierarchy, so just the way that we think and process any kind of anxiety moment, may be used to treat a specific phobia that may inhibit someone. So, for example, if someone's afraid of storms, you could say, all right, I actually watched a video about it. This woman and her husband built this like underground thing, which I know that's kind of extreme. Not everyone can do that, but um, she says, I feel way more safe now. Anytime that there's about to be a storm, I just go down there. She has like a pillow and she's fine. All right, what's the difference between specific phobias and generalized anxiety disorder? The difference is that while GAD contains worrying a non-persistent cause, specific phobias are irrational fears that cause an avoidance of a specific potentially persistent situation. So, like I said, GAD in my case, the cause is not persistent. If I'm worrying about, let's say, I don't know, what's a good example? Whether I did something right. Okay. Well, if it already happened, that's not the cause is gone. The cause is gone. It's not continuing. Unlike the storms are going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. So that's the difference between the specific phobia and GAD. What perspective explains PTSD as irrational beliefs? Cognitive. Well, didn't say that either. Sorry. I'm not going to say it. I said this already 66 times probably that I don't make these questions. And the only reason why I keep saying it is because I don't know if someone might watch this video and it's the only one that they've watched that I made. And then they're like, oh, why does he have those on there then? I have them on there because they are a good review and what are commonly on tests for these units, if you may have realized already. But yeah, that kind of makes sense. Irrational beliefs, that sounds cognitive. If you don't remember those, I think it's module 2. Create an example of compulsion. Oh, didn't talk about that either. But compulsion is just like you're compulsed to do something. I don't know, that might not be correct grammar, but here's an example. Early checks his test answers from time to time to make sure they're correct and has the irresistible urge to do so. Oh, that's a little bit familiar to me. Whenever I would take tests, that's exactly what I would do. I would always be the last one to finish, because I might actually have been one of the first to finish or the first, but I would never turn it in because I was just like, ugh, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if this is right. And I would look over them over and over again. And if I didn't, then I would just feel stressed out for the whole day until what I received a grade. Because it's just a worry that I would make some pointless, careless error. And that's not possible on a time test. That's another why I always hated time tests. Unexplainable and continual tension are symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder. Sometimes it can be unexplainable, and it's definitely continual. All right, so one more thing I'm going to say in this video before it's done is a good thing to say, which I probably already should have said this. Can't talk right, apparently. So to make sure that you know these terms, it's always good to create an example. That's why there's number 7. So that's especially helpful for the FRQs. So as we get closer to the end of this course, it's important to remember all these different terms. And I will make a video going over all of them, probably in like April. I mean, if you're watching this years later, then I probably already made it. But anyways, it's good to be like, okay, let's see, sensation, perception. All right, what's an example of perception or something like that? It's just good to do that. But this is definitely the easiest AP class. If this is your first one, you might be like, what the heck? This is hard. Well, wait till you get the other ones. They're a lot harder, definitely. But anyways, and if you need help, I already made videos for other AP classes anyways. But there you go. Thanks for watching.